Hey everybody, this is Emmy Thomas. I'm here talking to JP Morgan. JP Morgan, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everyone, which is what is it like to be you?
Well, curious. That would sum up my, in one word, who I am, and also in a very real sense, am trusting, at least in myself. Let's just say that, but maybe to my own detriment. Yeah.
Curious, what do you I'm curious about your curiosity, but what do you mean trusting in yourself? I've been thinking this a lot because well, let me just tell you why I've been thinking about it. I listened to the Calm app meditation and today it was talking about like knowing when to change, when to mix something up, when to kind of like, I need an adjustment in my life and know naturally. I thought that was like really interesting.
yeah. Well, I think trusting. I've always trusted that nothing really bad will happen to me, although I can put myself in situations where I I could die. Not so much nowadays. I'm a much older guy, so I'm more careful. But in my youth, it was normal for me to, I was really into climbing, and I did some really seriously dangerous things alone, and and had some close calls. The thing is with trusting, we also go into that sometimes in interpersonal relationships and experiences. And well, I thought I was always in control. And that's kind
Yeah.
of what leads me to led me to find out about you, but most notably the book that you wrote. Because I'm a guy who got into a relationship with somebody who I deeply cared about, and it didn't last very long. I had to call an end to it, but when I called an end to it, I was destroyed. Like I was a shell of my former self, and it took me a significant amount of time to kind of crawl out of the darkness of trying to normalize what wasn't normal. And why? So was there love involved? Yeah, there was. And I think when I put an end to it, it was choosing between two hells. So it was the hell of constantly going through a process of being idealized and then devalued and then discarded and then repeat. And this would repeat. And the idealization phases were always amazing. And I used to always think, oh, this is going to be okay. It's going to be
Yeah.
okay this time around. And then it would devalue. Oh, and the devaluation process would make me look inward, and I would tell myself what I was being told. You're a liar, you're no good, why do you do, like really awful things. And then discard, get out of here. And then a couple of days later, a text would come in, the phone would ring, and it would start all over again. So the book uh, helped me a lot in identifying the behaviors. And I think at that time, I was diagnosing the problem on my own, really, like without the qualifications. But I was reading your book and I go, this is who I had an experience with. This is that person. This is it. So I read the whole thing once, and that was almost a decade ago. So I've forgotten a lot of it. But in what happened after I read that book is it led me down the road of reading other books and understanding what psychopathy is exactly, at least to the extent that I could understand it from text, from medical papers, medical documents, and trying to get it. I went to therapists and they weren't nearly as helpful to me as understanding what might have been the issue with her. Let's just leave it at that. Do I think she's a sociopath? Well, her behavior was kind of prototypical. Is she a psychopath? I don't know. I could say that, but then, what do I mean by that? Or could I say she's a malignant narcissist? I suppose. But I try to use those labels carefully in today's world. Did she hurt me? Well, yeah, she did. Did she intentionally hurt me? Hmm. That's a tough one to answer because I think in a very real way, she did her best in some sense not to hurt me, but she couldn't help it because of she was she was trying to get out of a mindset, or let's say she was trying to avoid circumstances that she knew would happen, and this time she didn't want them to happen. One real important detail at the very, very beginning of our experience together, she called me says, we got to sit down and talk. This is important, like we hadn't never really been together, but at least we had sex. And so there was this interface, right? And I invited her over to a party with a bunch of my friends. And okay, the next day, she had to sit down with me, and she goes, I don't do relationships. That's what she said. I don't do them. I go, oh, okay, that's fine. She goes, and then it went into like, you were very controlling. You were very, like trying to guide me along. And I go, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be doing that. I don't want you to feel that. So automatically I'm starting to apologize for things.
Mm-hmm.
So she just left it that go, this is not going to go anywhere. And I walked out of that feeling a little weird. Like for one, I didn't and plan on having any kind of, we weren't there. And I genuinely liked her, at least as far as a personality. We did have some history together socially. So I didn't want to compromise that. So I just thought, okay, I'm going back to my corner, and this'll blow over, you know. So what happened next was a few days later, where we would interface socially. And I want to keep that a little bit on the low down. Let's just say it was a gym, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so where we would interface, I just really, I was feeling a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, I just wanted to do my thing there. I was happy. And then there was this, like, what's the problem? How come you don't want to, like, talk to me? Or you don't, like, I saw you in there and you went, and I'm like, well, what's going on? So the short of the story was like, it was within 24 hours, I was sitting in her vehicle in a parking lot and she was crying.
Wow.
Yeah. Though there were real tears coming out of her eyes. And she said to me, you know what's going to happen is you're going to leave and I'm never going to see you again. That's what's going to happen. And I said to her, what do you mean? It's impossible. Like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to be me. And it was preposterous. Like, what? I was just sitting in front of you a couple days ago and you were telling me, like, you don't do relationships. Okay, I get it. To, I just don't want this to go down like this. I'm like, well, I should have asked more questions.
Yeah.
Because what I'm doing is I'm assuming things here. I'm assuming that I'm in control. I'm assuming that, okay, because there's tears, because of this, that, well, maybe maybe I need to give this more time. And really what I should have done at that moment, knowing what I know now, is like, what does that mean to you? Like, what
Yes.
happened? Okay. What does that mean to you when you say you're never going to see me again? What has happened with your past experiences that are sort of like this? How do they go down?
Yes.
That's what I
You
should
didn't
have
think to
said.
ask any of that?
No,
Wow. Okay.
I'm just like, this is going to be fine. You
Wow.
know,
Okay. What were your kind of your assumptions? Like, oh, I'm different, like she's been with some real deadbeats before or whatever.
well, I had no idea what her history was.
Uh,
Okay. So I right away I just assumed that, she has her life. We interface for a very short period of time, a few times a week within the gym, and it's nothing more than that. So, there was leading up to this whole experience, there was a little bit extracurricular social interaction, not sex, but just, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that together. And so there were signals, at least to me, that meant that there was real care, and there was something maybe a little bit more. And okay, my rationale at that time was like, okay, she's afraid. And okay, for sure, afraid. But I wasn't afraid. I was like, okay, well, we'll just go on till tomorrow. We'll think about it tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to leave. So I made some plans to try to like smooth things out, some social plans. Nothing more than that. And then things ensued from there. It was sex again. And then, like all the things that it's a quite a while ago, but I do remember my feelings at that very beginning is that, okay, here we are and things are kind of evolving and I have feelings. And maybe I just didn't want to ask the questions because it was so early. And I was kind of shocked at how powerful her behavior was. There was always texting in the morning. Good morning. How's it going? Like, I just got out of bed,
mhm,
like, where are you right now? What are you doing? During the middle of the day. And I, I we had known each other really intimately for more than just a week, couple weeks at this point. So it was
uh-huh,
this, they they call it love bombing.
uh,
So in a very real way, it was that. I was trying to be careful, like, I'm thinking, let's let some time go by and see, then, let's take it slow and nope, there was none of that. Come over right now, and I love that as a guy, you know, that was like wonderful.
uh-huh,
So, I was just, at the time, just very, very single and
mhm,
okay. And okay with that. Like, I, I, I wanted to have some peace in my life. I needed that at that time. And here she is, you know, very attractive and just, well, so yeah, I think maybe in a real sense that I was immature,
mm,
with relationships, but also sort of this figure within the gym that I was in who was, well, popular in a way, you know. I trained a lot, I was fun to train with. It was, so I had I was really attached to everybody in there. So it was fun. There was no bad vibes, anything like that. And maybe in a way for her, I became sort of this opportunity in a way.
yeah,
That's the way I look at it back then. Today, I look at it like this is somebody who is, by himself, he's doing his own thing. He's not attached to, and everybody else likes him. So therefore, I'm going to zero in on that. And, okay, there's nothing inherently wrong with that,
right.
right? Right? There's nothing. But what happened later on as I went through it, that's where the real catastrophe occurred, was as it did evolve into something, and how I handled it and then how she handled it. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you that there's nothing wrong with seeing somebody as an opportunity. I used to kind of say, like, back when I was more eligible, let's put it, younger, probably more attractive, wealthier, or at least like a higher income. And people would be kind of like interested in that. I'd be like, well, I mean, all those things are just a distillation of some of my choices, you know, that I went to law school, that I have this job, that I did well enough for this, that I, you know, am, you know, have enough friends or whatever support, or, you know, they're all just things that they're outward manifestations of inward qualities in me. So I was like, yeah, sure, you know, that isn't that what everything is that we're just attracted to other people for various reasons, mostly because, you know, something about them appeals to us, and often appeals to us because we want that in our life. We want some of those things in our life.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't want to say that there was again, there's nothing wrong with her being attracted to me initially. I think that's where it went.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't I wasn't interested in fishing my own pond, you know. I wasn't
Right.
interested in dating anybody in there, you know, because that could happen. And I just went, that is a slippery slope once you get on it. So, but I couldn't resist her advances. I was
Yeah.
completely unable to do it. And in a real sense, there was the narrative that this is nothing real. This isn't, you know, this is no big deal. Can you handle it? That was always thrown out at me. Is like, can you handle this? I'm like, what do you mean? like, what is there to handle? You know? So I'm just as much at fault in this sense for my own for my own demise as maybe she is. But I think what happened, you know, let me just fast forward to when, because I don't want to share too many of the details because I don't
Yeah.
think that's what the audience wants to hear about. Okay.
Uh,
Because look, if you want to learn about anything that happened to me, you can go on, you go to Kiora, you can go read about everybody. Like he was a narcissist and he's a sociopath or she's a, and all these bad things that happened to us, right? So it's all out there. The thing is when I stopped, when I asked that we just go forward and pretend that this never happened. That's how I put it.
when you
You know,
broke up with her.
yeah, it was bad. It well,
Yeah.
and I can't even say it was a breakup. It was just the day it happened. It was just I hadn't spoken with her in a couple weeks because of another bad experience that okay, at least it was bad for me, right?
Right.
And I'm trying and I knew something was wrong and I rather than blaming her, which was easy to do, I to help save myself, I would look at me and I go, what are, you know, you're delusional, number one. Um, you may be experiencing some sense of cognitive dissonance right now. I knew
Mhm.
about that, you know, but I really didn't know about things like narcissism. I didn't know what a sociopath is. I didn't know about psychopaths. And nor would I like invoke those words or those labels because I just, other than what Hollywood portrays, that was the extent of it. You
Right.
know, I didn't understand, but I did know there was something wrong with me, and I had to fix that first. And so a couple weeks went by, and I was working, and I was kind of you know, after a couple weeks, I was starting to like settle into a healthy work schedule because I was really battling emotionally.
Yeah.
And I remember I got, you know, a phone call. It was her. And I was like got ready to step into a meeting and I couldn't take it, you know. It was voicemail. The day went by and the evening and I just didn't feel like picking up that phone and calling back.
Mhm.
Not right now. Maybe tomorrow, but you know, I was at there was some healing going on and I fully intended to call her back. Well, the next day I get a you know, an angry text. Like, why didn't you call back? I go, I was stepping into a meeting and by the end of my day, I was just not in a place where and then her reply was, well, you're so full of shit,
Mm.
you know. some really negative things. I go, what do you mean? What's wrong? And well, get to the point. I scheduled a time for us to sit down and meet a few weeks later. And we're sitting there, and I'm trying to ask, like, what's going on? That's kind of it, because I didn't know what else to say. Like, what's going on? And she raised her hands and shook her head, like, what are you talking about? And I showed her my phone. That was the text exchange, where she was calling me expletives. I go, well, this. And she looks at the phone. She goes, that never happened. I go, well, it's right here. No, it didn't. That's not me. I go, here it is. It's right here. And she got up and walked away. And I was devastated, just like I was crushed, just out, because I really did have this deep affinity or love for her, right? So she texted me a little while later in the afternoon and said that I was selfish. Okay.
Hmm.
I said, okay, like, okay, fair enough. I said, we have to, like, pretend that this never happened. We have to go on. And her reply was that, well, that's what I've been saying. I go, no. I mean, like, we can't interface anymore. There's none of that. And that was the end of it. I had to block her because I didn't want any more. So going forward from there, it was a process of trying to forget or trying to understand what happened, because I was angry, right? I was really angry. And I had to try to figure out how to put my life back together in some sense. Like, it was hard for me to think during the day. I'd go through the day, and there was lots of moments where I thought of just picking up the phone again, reaching out. And I would
Yeah.
say, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to figure out how to get out of this without attacking her or attacking anybody else or bringing anybody else into it. So what happened is I ended up having to leave that gym because it didn't stop there. There were still, like, subtle advances on her part within the gym to try to communicate. I just didn't want that. So I left. And in that moment, when I left that, because that meant leaving everybody there,
Right.
that is when it all of a sudden hit me. It's like, shoot, you are really messed up. The way I looked at the world just got worse from there. you know um I was alone. I didn't have a lot of friends. But what happened after that was just this process of trying to understand why I believed in one thing but was shown another, why there was behavior that supported my beliefs, and yet the next day there would be completely different. Like, I didn't know who to be. I was always walking on eggshells. So, and I think the fact that I say that, look, there was love, real love involved, I felt real love, that kind of says it all, right? So I can't remember how I was led to your book exactly, but I remember trying to troubleshoot my head. I found it. I was searching on trauma. I was searching on depression. I was searching on relationship, that kind of stuff. And I think that's where I found it. I bought that one, and when I read it, then I went, this is who I was. This is who I dated. This is her like prototypical, fits perfectly. So as somebody who kind of survived this experience, and really I survived myself in a really real sense. It wasn't her. It was me. And I think the viewers, one thing that I learned through this, it took me better part of 5 years of really, like, not an hour would go by during the day where I didn't think about her. You know, you know, I couldn't. I would go to sleep at night thinking about her, and not so much intimately, but just thinking, you know, and in a lot of ways, how sorry I was that this all happened the way it did. But fantasizing in some way that would all resolve itself,
Yeah.
you know, and that's not realistic. So not now, not this time in my life, and thank goodness it didn't. Like it would just be more demise, more trouble for me. So I think by really looking at myself and spending some time, I spent a lot of time on Kiora trying to, like, I could read people, I could read other people who had similar experiences and their disdain for the perpetrator. Let's just put it that way for now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just let's say that. Okay. So their disdain, and like, and I saw the patterns, like everybody kind of went through the same kind of experience. And okay, so we can recognize some of the red flags in the very beginning of any kind of experience, whether it's intimacy or whether it's a business relationship. And we can pick up on, the love bombing, or somebody coming on really, really fast. Even in the business world, that can
Yeah.
happen. Oh, because there's something in it for them. Oh, okay, if I can, come on, if we can do this together, it'll be great. You'll make a lot of money. Those kind of things. I just saw, on local community page where I live, this guy writes, my son was killed in a traffic accident coming home from college last week. That's not funny. But I have this brand new laptop, brand new MacBook Pro I bought. I was going to give it to him. And since he's not going to make it home, he'll never see it. And I just want to give it away. And I went, this is a scam.
Uh-huh.
Nobody's going to give that away.
Right.
Not on the community page. You're going to give it to a family member. But there was a time where I would trust that wholeheartedly.
Really?
Oh yeah, I would believe it, you know, until it was too late, until there was like you have to pay for shipping. But
That's
you live.
interesting, because you said that at the beginning. You were like, oh, I just trusted that I'd always be okay. But maybe that trust that you'd always be okay played a part in kind of just being like, sure, fine.
Exactly. I had enough pride in myself based on my experiences, which really true, like all my quote unquote adventures had nothing to do with other people. It had to do with weather.
I
It had to
see.
do with conditions. It had to
Yeah.
do with, like, no doubt, extreme adversity. But it never had to do with other people. And even if there were other people on an adventure, um, we were pre-qualified to be with each other, and like we were going to get along. We weren't going to have problems, and we
Hmm.
never did. So that's what, kind of where I come from. Is like I am really good by myself, but not so good when I get with other people, because I end up trusting them, because in my past I always have. I've had to, where I've been close with people. If I'm on belay, then there's a lot of trust right there.
Right.
Like, you know, I know that everything's going to be okay. Like, it's predictable. It's highly predictable. So I was never worried about that. And so life kind of went like that in a real sense. So fast forward to dealing with this. It was like I said, it was really hard to go do anything. It was hard to go for a mountain bike ride without ruminating. It was really destructive to the point where I didn't want to visit any feelings. It was hard for me to go into a gym because all the memories come back. I finally did, you know, but when I went into that gym, I started all over on purpose, just as a beginner,
Hmm.
in a sense, so that I could revisit everything and build the new version of me. So
Interesting.
it was really, really hard. I was so attached. And I want the viewers to know that the love that I had, fast forward now, this is 10 years down the road or more, that the love that I had wasn't so much for her as it was how I felt about myself when I was around her, how that was allowed to happen. And that's really critical in understanding. So codependent, most certainly, you know, or a dependency, let's say. There was a real dependency on her because I would go through that idealization phase. It was wonderful. And it was always different, but the devaluation was the same and the discard was always the same. And it got to a point where it was predictable. So once there was discard and there was total despair, I would just sit there and just wait. Set the calendar because the idealization would come back. Even my friends knew there was something wrong with me. Family knew. They're like, man, you're messed up. Why are you behaving like this? So I think what this all culminated in, all that suffering, it really culminated in understanding what a sociopathic mind operates like and what a psychopath is. And I emphasize this, at least as far as I can understand it. Okay. Obviously, I'm not formally educated on this topic.
Nor am I.
Okay. But I can read documentation and I can relate to it in some sense. And I don't have, there was a long time where I really had disdain and I had a vicious sense of revenge. I used to think to myself, I would skin her alive if I could. Really dark, you know. But like in today's world, I don't know that a day ever went by where I just sat down and I said, I forgive her. I don't think that's it. Is that I understand in a very deep sense how she feels. And it wasn't, and once I got into reading about what a sociopath is and what a psychopath is, what they're capable of and what they're not capable of, there
Yeah.
was an understanding, at least, that interested me just in the concept of a sociopath or sociopathic behavior. And it got me away from thinking about her. I was much more interested in just the mechanics here that are involved of how somebody could possibly not manage emotions or feelings like I do, you know. And I think sometimes that's the flaw of humankind is we all think we go about our life and we think everybody's like us. And I think through this journey, I realized that we're not all alike at all. Everybody says, oh, we're all the same. No, we all have radically different upbringings, experiences. Some of us experience abuse and we carry that. We use that filter to look at our lives through. But then there's also the brain and how it's configured and how it doesn't always come out perfect. And what is that? What is perfection? Right. But I think in a real, very real way, the person who, let's just say, abused me, I don't think it was her plan. I think she was trying, she was trying to learn as she went. The there was reasons for me to believe that. There was long pauses and silence sometimes when I was communicating with her, where there was no emotion. She would just stare. And I think she was trying to adapt in some way. So it's not that she didn't feel anything, she did, but she didn't know how to modulate or adapt in a way that would allow her to move in a direction that helped her avoid what she knew was going to happen.
Right.
And that was really hard for me to wrap my head around. You know, like how is that even possible that you can't? So she had her tools, things that she's learned over time, that when she invokes them, she's able to get results. And when she doesn't get a result that she expects, it's like, what? Wait a minute. It's like me, like something's the software is broken.
Uh-huh.
Okay, why is it doing this? Oh, I have error codes that I can go to. You know, I have all kinds of tools that help me troubleshoot it. She doesn't. She doesn't have those tools. So it's better to just devalue and discard and start over and try to get it right, at least right in what that looks like to her. I went back. I don't know, it might have been 6 years, something like that. One of the things I wouldn't do, and it was very difficult, was to look on social media.
Mm.
Even though I blocked her for a period of time, I didn't want her reaching out to me. I did unblock her in a way that was sort of this way of letting go, right? It's kind of funny. It's like social media is such this thing in our lives where it's a part of us. You know, like
Uh-huh.
I laughed at it. I go, I'm letting you go by unblocking you. There's like you, how pathetic, you know? But I wanted to clear that out. I didn't want to pick up my phone all the time because I think about it. This person's blocked while I'm
Huh.
browsing. Just didn't want that. So let her go. But I wouldn't go to her page and look. And I did eventually, years, many years later. And I could see the history of men. And I could see in the dialogue the same things being said to them that she said to me. And it was the same thing. And it freaked me out. And I closed it. You know, I went, that's it. But that in a lot of ways that confirmed that didn't mean to me at that moment that she's a bad person. It just in a very real, it confirmed what I had suspected, is that there are patterns, things that she does that work,
Yeah.
and they work on certain types of people. And the people she was interfacing with were a lot like me, you know. So if you are looking at this, you're a viewer and you're suffering, you're looking for, closure or something like that, right? I think the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to really understand yourself and how you got yourself into that predicament. Because you there's no sense in blaming the perpetrator. And I know it's different for a lot of folks are in relationships where there's kids involved, right? So it might be a marriage that broke up. Like it's like that's a problem, right? The way you deal with that is you stay on topic. That's all. Just like if you're exchanging the kids, it's like I'll drop the kids off at this time and make sure you're there. I don't, because if you're not there, you're gonna have to explain that away. And then if you're and if you're a target and you're in the position of defending yourself, good luck, with somebody who's focused on bringing you down for whatever reason, you know.
Yeah.
Make sure you're on time and but just stay on topic. But if you can walk away and close the door behind you, do it. It's hard. You get a choice of like two hells, and that's the hell of like literally you will be destroyed in that experience, that relationship. It will destroy you eventually. But if you walk away, close the door, you're going to experience real hardship and real sorrow. And I'm not really like, I tried therapists, and the therapists were always trying to tell me to use affirmations, okay, meditation. Boy, the last thing I wanted to do was meditate.
Hmm.
Because if I was alone with my thoughts, where I went, it was really hard. But I think over time, what I did is I delved into trying to understand myself and try to understand by reading your book what I was able to really substantiate was prototypical sociopathic behavior, and could it have been worse? Oh yeah, it could have been way, way worse for me. But I think that's kind of it. That's the story in a nutshell. Significant, yeah. I hurt other people in that experience. It wasn't just me. There were other people that I left that I hurt. I hurt I hurt one particular person very, very close to me in this, like, yeah, I hurt a person that's like really close to me. We're still close. We're still, but this is somebody who I would never dream of hurting. And I hurt him in a very real way by this experience. And so yeah, I think that's kind of it. I'm rambling a little bit now.
Let me ask intuition a couple questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, a couple more. Hold on. Could you could you kind of talk a little bit about like some of the helpful things you've kind of talked about, like you tried to understand yourself and your role. You said that you tried to understand her and her limitations and how that kind of played into things. Would you say, that understanding was kind of the key to feeling better, or did that understanding kind of fall flat for you? Like, what was it necessary to understand? Is a
Ah,
good question. Did you
what
feel like that was like
was it
helpful
nec-
in your journey? Yeah.
I was it necessary to understand? Was that what you
Yeah.
said? Was it
Yeah, yeah.
necessary?
Was it like worth the time to understand? Like, is it worth? Because I'm genuinely curious. So
Yeah, like why would
I
somebody
don't
sit
know.
around? Okay, well, let's just say you don't try to understand it.
Right.
Then what? All right. Does it just go away? Well, maybe, but at some point there has to be a conclusion. There has to be
Mm.
some kind of stop, like a sentence ends with a period. There has to be that. You know, do I still do I do I still have feelings for her at this point? Is it completely dried up? No, but let's put it this way, and then I'll get to the understanding part. Those feelings are there, but what I did is like those feelings occupied 3/4 of my space, my reality. Like it was like it's like I'm in a room with this giant thing, this blob, this like it's crushing. Like I can't get in and out of that space. So what do? You build a bigger space. You build a bigger space. And what is that? That's very personal. Like that's not a silver bullet, but that is a new challenge and a new place to focus your. That was for me a new place to focus my attention. And I didn't feel better day one. I didn't feel better a year down the road, but I was on my way. You know, I put one foot in front of the other. That's what I would tell myself. Eyes are in front of my head. My arms articulate outward. My knees are in front. Feet are in front. I'm supposed to be going forward, I forget where I read this. Somebody says there's a reason the windshield on a car is bigger than the rearview mirror. It's because you need to see where you're going. The rearview mirror, it's only there to show stuff that's really important. So make sure that things that are really important are showing in the rearview mirror. That's it. And so that didn't make it go away, but those were my tools. So at some level, there has to be an understanding of at least who we are and where we're going. And in order for me to do that, me personally, I had to break things down. I make my living solving problems. So this is my thinking process. I work in a software environment where I fix things that are broken that others can't fix, or at least they found me to fix it. Let's just put it that way. Okay. There are others who can fix it, but it falls in my lap. I'm going to troubleshoot it. And I like that. I like doing that for a living. So I started to extract from the problem the components. There's her, there's me. There's everybody else. Okay. Anybody else that I hurt, I immediately apologize to them. I'm sorry that I did this. I'm sorry that I caused you hurt. I'm working on fixing, understanding myself and understanding what happened. And I can't say that I do right now, but it's ongoing. But I do want you to know I'm doing this because I am sorry. That was number one. Okay. I had to apologize. And even the people who may not have been hurt by it, I wanted to at least get it out there. It's like, look, I'm sorry. So I went into at least understand her as far as I understood her, as somebody who had some kind of a social disorder on some level, compared to who? Well, maybe compared to all the other experiences I had in life with people. Okay. Maybe compared to other romantic relationships that I had that ended amicably, not with, not with any destruction socially. So I had to understand that. I also had to understand myself of how did I allow myself, when I was mad at myself, how did I allow myself to get in this predicament? Kiora, I would read the posts where people were saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I keep dating narcissists. I'm like, well, I always wanted to write, the problem isn't the narcissist, it's you. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to yourself? And then, so that's a big part of the problem, is that some of us, when we're victimized, and that's real. Like, the pain is real. And hurting somebody else is also very, very wrong, no matter what you are. I always tell my friends that if they're listening, I would say it's mostly just neurotypical people who perpetrate the worst evils. The worst things. We lie to hurt, we steal, murder. It doesn't always take a psychopath to do that. It just so happens that some murderers are in fact psychopaths. Yeah. So, right. So I think in understanding the components at play, which was behavioral, was very psychological. Okay. Because really the damage that was being done was, well, we could say it was covert. Let's just say it was. But it happened in broad sight. It happened in broad daylight in front of everybody. They just didn't know it was happening. Friends, they don't know. So was I being beaten? Was I being stabbed? Was I being stolen from? No, none of that was happening. It was all psychological. And that was the thing, it's like what I thought was happening wasn't happening. What I was told wasn't reality. And then my behavior as it manifest in the social circle, people were struck by it. They're like, what's wrong with him? So understanding what was being said, what was really happening, and why. What could cause this to happen? I think that helped me a ton. And there it's not a simple Google. It's not a session on Quora reading people's posts. It takes a long time to understand it. You know, I forget who it was, and I think they were talking about you. This just popped in my head. A famous TV personality psychologist guy. Oh, was it Dr. Phil? Right? And I remember watching him, and I thought, okay, I'm not a psychologist, but I do know that he just deals with criminals. And that's different than, say, a sociopath who has a family or doesn't have a family, but has a career and just lives a life that is, let's just say, typical. I always like one of the words I avoid in today's world is normal, because
Uh-huh.
normal, like I hear, and that is from my experience, really. That's from that. It's like, what is normal? There's certainly abnormal, but normal, compared to what? Like, I think we're all abnormal on some level, somewhere, some way in our lives. But I wanted to understand that the disordered mind, and I'll just call it that, disordered, okay? Because maybe through disorder, there's a swath of confusion in the wake of that kind of behavior that was unintended, right? That's not the goal. But in that, really, the way society looks at other people and maybe their disordered behavior is not like how we look at somebody who's handicapped. So somebody who's handicapped, let's say, is paralyzed from the waist down. We can see that. It's observable. Okay. Well, we can invite somebody who's handicapped to go run a marathon with us. It's just going to look different for them. Can they do it? Well, and there's always a way. If there's a will, there's a way, right? All right, we'll figure it out. Like, how many of those stories you see where dad carries his kid who has cerebral palsy,
Mm-hmm.
in a triathlon? Did that kid complete the triathlon? Well, by my measure, he did, in a very real way. It was a marathon, it was a triathlon for that kid to endure all of that. And then there's the veteran who lost both legs, gave his all, right? IED took him out, who has prosthetics that allow him to run, or her to run. And they accomplish real goals. Why? Because we adapt. We find ways to adapt. Versus, you're paralyzed, you're never going to do it. You're a loser. You're different. Look at you. Different person. There's that. And so I think what
Excuse me.
happens with psychology, in a sense, is it's sort of, it's frowned upon. Like, if you go say you're going to go see a therapist, well, you're weak. you know okay, you're weak, right? Right. you know uh there's always the fat guy that shows up at the gym who stays and puts on gloves, and it's hard, and he runs out of gas. He has to sit out around. That is the guy or the girl that I most admire, because they're like, I remember one time, I remember a student looking across the mat with this weird look. It was jujitsu, right? And this weird look because this really fat, big lady was trying it out.
Uh-huh.
And I was livid. I was like, you roll with her. You, don't judge. She can't help it. But I mean, she can't help it right this second. But if
In
you,
this moment, she can't help it.
you
Yeah,
can't,
she's
she can't help it, but she's
yeah.
on her way. And you better make sure that she leaves this gym today with every reason to come back tomorrow. That's what you do. Every reason. Do not marginalize her just because of what you see and what your experience is. Yeah, you can't wrap your legs around her. You can't get you're not going to be able to do a Kimura on her. So what? Get up, make her take you down, whatever. Just get going with it. It'll over time.
Yeah.
Not everybody stays. It's the skinny ones, the bullies from the street. They're always the first ones to leave. But she stayed.
Oh, really? Good for her.
Yeah, she stayed, and she lost something like 200 pounds. It's unbelievable. But her story is just as unbelievable as anybody else in that gym. But that's her story. So I'm digressing a little bit, but the point I'm trying to make is that because I went out and I manifest all this pain, who was the problem? Who was the problem? And a lot of people are going to not like me for saying this. You know, was it she that was the problem or me? What do you think?
Well, this is kind of why I wanted to ask you about the understanding is like, I think the answer is kind of complicated for all of these types of situations. But the person that you can control, the person that can kind of take what they've learned and make changes is you. You can learn about her, but you can't change her. But you could learn about you and you could change you. So if you were just like looking for things that are fixable problems, it's not her.
Yeah, I she's not the problem.
Yeah.
She's not, I mean, I could blame her, but what does that get me? And out of blame and out of calling her expletives, that might make me feel elevated, but that doesn't really solve my issue,
Right.
right? And there's people out in the world that I just don't like. But that doesn't mean that I'm in a position to demonize them. I got to be careful with that, you know? And I've learned that through this experience is that the more I learned about her, certainly the less attracted I was to her. But also at the same time, I learned that she has the capacity to do things that live in a way that I never could. I remember the hyper rationality. It was excellent. She would zero in on problems and solutions very quickly, like with piercing prejudice. It was really incredible. Like I remember a couple times she would give me advice on dilemmas that I was facing, and it was like, geez, she was right though. She was right. So she wasn't cluttered up with emotions and history like I am. Okay. My childhood wasn't perfect. A lot of people grow up without perfect childhoods, but we still function in life. We move on in some way, somehow. And but I still reference those things. She had none. I remember how when I was talking about, I can't remember what the topic was, but it was something emotional, like like not talking with somebody about something. And I remember how she said, I would never do, like, I'm not like that. And I went, what do you mean? Like, I kind of thought she was calling me out. That's what I thought, but she wasn't. She was looking at my behavior and going, what's the point? Like,
Why
why
be petty? Yeah.
petty? Like, there's no usefulness in that. That's how she looked at it. There's nothing useful about that behavior. She was completely unaware that there was any kind of like feelings, at least in the way I look at them, the way I experience them, you know, there wasn't that. There wasn't, I wasn't, she wasn't trying to be in anybody's shoes because that's not really an option. It was just like, why do that? Because at least she thought, as far as she understood it, you're hurting somebody. And that's like, why would you do that?
Yeah, why would you choose to do that? Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? You know? And I still fail in that department. You know, I had a recent failure of sense in that in a business in the business world, and that's on me. You know, but I caught myself in it because you can't. You know, I'm I'm that person that is emotional to my own detriment, and I think that's what happens to some of us when we get in a relationship with somebody who is maybe not capable of those kinds of feelings, you know. And so where's the confusion lie? Well, okay, it does lie with me. There's confusion there. But what about her? She goes away like what? Probably it's probably like, okay, that went exactly as I thought it would, and next. Maybe that's what
Yeah.
happens. You know, okay, all right. You know, that tree fell down. Okay. Like, you know, so I think understanding how she works in a way where I try to be as objective as I possibly could, and understanding the science behind her thinking, it allowed me to understand her, at least as far as, okay, this is why things went the way they did. And once I discovered that, I could say to myself, okay, the love I had was very real, and I can accept that now. I think it has a place. Is it orphaned love? Well, yeah, I think it is, you know, but I have to take care of it, you know.
Mm.
I have to, I'm in, you know, I'm in love with somebody now that totally separate. So it's not the same thing, but I can still have that love, at least for that version of myself and that experience, and let it be.
Well, if you do have it, then I think the acceptance is like you're not your only choice, you know, but kind of like why would you choose something else? Like my meditation instructor's always saying allow things to be here because they're what happens to be here. You know, they already are here. And so like just allow it allowing is just acknowledging. Like it's okay to acknowledge I feel like in your situation that you still have a connection to at least the idea of this person because that's what happens to be here. Like you don't have to kind of beat yourself up over how you feel.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I did. I beat myself up over it because I thought I could fix it.
Mm,
And really, there was nothing to fix. There was certainly a lot of hurt. And, you know, sometimes that hurt, as I see a lot of victims of these kinds of experiences, intimate relationships, it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I don't know that there's a silver bullet for that. I don't know that it ends. I do know it ends with a lot of work, and
yeah.
that you don't know when you're going to walk away going, it's truly in the past. But it does happen eventually, you know. Like there was a long time where I just couldn't talk about it like I can now
Yeah.
because it really is in the past. And I think people change over time. All of us change. And one thing with me that I realized is the hurt that I felt and the ruminations, those were not changing. And as everybody else is changing around me, you know, people are growing up. People that were young are now older, and I can see it. And yet here I am in this rut, right? And you know, that's the thing, is that when we ruminate, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's reality and what you're telling it. It's very important for folks to understand that, is that, you know, as athletes rehearse things in their minds before they compete, like this is what's going to happen. Surfers do this a lot. Surfers visualize what they're, how their cutback's going to be, or when the wave is shaped like this, they're going to do this.
Yeah, musicians do too. Kind
Yeah.
of like go through the process without like physically doing it, just mentally.
Yeah. So I remember when I would think about her, what I would do is I would shrink her down till she was like this big,
Uh,
really, really tiny. And that worked for me. It did. I'd
yeah,
shrink it. I'd shrink it down. In my mind, I would see her just shrink till she was barely visible in my, and I would focus on that instead of
yeah,
instead of reliving all the color and sounds and everything in the moment. Gone. And it took a long time for that really to stick. So now, yeah, I can talk about it, but I just, you know, understanding yourself and understanding her, you know, as a sociopath, not because she is one, you know, and but because everything that I've learned about a sociopath is what I experienced. Her behavior was so like that, you know. So, and not always in a devious way. It was just,
yeah.
it wasn't devious. It was just like I think I told you in the very beginning, she had this dog in the backyard that just destroyed things, you know. And I remember, well, just get rid of it. And she's like, didn't care. Like just didn't really care, you know. So there were lots of things in her life that were problems. Like I could see that they were problems, and she was oblivious to it. And they were like really serious freaking problems. The one thing that she really paid attention to was finances, spot on that stuff, you know, and taking care of herself. She was great at that. But everything else was utter chaos. And it didn't phase. Chaos was normal. You know, there were other people in her life that were very unhappy. Didn't matter. It didn't matter. Yeah. It's oblivious to it. Uh-oh.
Times.
I'm losing sound.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay. Man, I need to replace this cord maybe. There are people sometimes that say like, oh, they realize the person's a sociopath, and then they think, well, that's the explanation, is that they're a sociopath, and that's kind of like done in their minds. But I wonder, like people listening to this, maybe who've had similar experiences, is that really the solution? Does it seem like just saying, hey, they're a sociopath, does that seem to absolve you of like any feelings? Like, do you
Yeah.
actually feel absolution from just kind of like knowing it? Like I think the world wants you to believe that you can just call somebody a sociopath or a narcissist and then just be like kind of what you said at the beginning. It's as if it never happened. We can just move on because that person is like, malformed or something, like a Quasimodo human. And we can just be like, well, that was just I don't know, like something that has no relevance to you. Like your participation in it has no relevance to who you are as a person. Like it's as if the thing couldn't never happen. And it's funny that when you said like during the breakup conversation, you both said that. She said, "Yeah, that's what I've been saying this whole time is let's pretend that it's never happened." And you also wanted to do the same thing, but pretend a different thing never happened.
Exactly. Her idea was that the conversation and just the recent drama never happened, that we would just keep going on. And that was probably the better approach, really, the most rational.
Mm,
All right.
hmm.
And let's just say, just go on without anything else happening. But
Yeah.
because I wanted it to go on where like you're no longer in the picture on any level at all. That's me not wanting to suffer at all. That's how I looked at it. I couldn't cope. She could. I couldn't, you
Yeah.
know.
And
And it's
that's not a negative thing for you, like, if that's just where you were at, but, I guess the thing that I find interesting is, like, I definitely that resonates with me, like, I definitely acted as if nothing happened. I'm great at compartmentalization,
yeah,
like,
okay.
my girlfriend had, like, the worst breakup of her life or whatever, and she said, "I was sad for 2 days, and then it was as if it never happened." And I'm like, "Okay." That sounds kinda crazy, but it's like, it's not something that just psychopaths do. Like, I feel like there's almost, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't want anyone to think like I'm judging people that do this. I'm just asking, how is it working out for you? Like, does that actually work for you to just be like, did it actually work for you? You said, let's pretend it never happened. And were you able to pretend it never happened? Yeah.
No, I wasn't. In for me, saying that was the start, was me committing to going on a path where I have to face myself and I have to face this horror, this disdain, like what I don't want to happen. It has to happen because I knew in that moment that I'm stuck in a cycle. This is wrong. At least I don't like how I'm feeling, but I still love and I still want and I still need.
Yeah.
But I have to literally be brave enough to turn away from it and go somewhere else, not knowing what that's going to be
Right.
and how that's going to work out. Like, who am I? That's literally how I felt. So for her, I think it was like, okay, it's over. I'm certain of it. Like maybe a couple weeks went by where since I was still around, there were still like attempts to engage.
Mhm.
But once I was gone, once I finally quit going, it was not a topic of conversation. It was over with. I think mostly at that point. I wasn't there, so I don't know. And I cut everybody out. I cut all the friends out, people that had nothing to do with it. I done. Like, please don't talk to me. There was somebody who had messaged me, maybe a year later, asking advice on where to take their kids to train.
Mhm.
And I had nothing bad to say about anybody, but I did emphasize don't go there. You know,
Mhm.
um,
Mm.
so and that wasn't healthy. That it didn't like. I didn't like that. So, um, emotional, yeah, I am. I think those personality traits, highly emotional. That would be me. So that's not everybody, and I think some men will do better than others in a circumstances like I did. It's just that, at least for me, very emotional person. And I think a lot about things and think them through and try to want to wonder, like, why did this happen? What went wrong? And maybe that's to my own detriment. That, like, in a very real way, I wasn't able to understand that, hey, this is something that you need to let go and be able to do it. I think that's something anybody can do. Or, well, a lot of people can do that. I just can't. There was this subject of casual sex. I was reading about that just recently, and I still feel that is nitroglycerin. Like, you do not do that. Like,
Mhm.
don't do that. That's me talking, because it creates complexity. It creates a whole nother layer of complexity and implied belonging in a way that is not entirely healthy. But can people do it? I think so. I don't think all casual encounters end up a disaster where cars get keyed and things like that. But that was certainly not anything that ever happened to me. But I do know friends who had those one night stands where they just went bad and there were big problems, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's advice I give out to my loved ones, is that one night stands are like, do not do that.
Yeah.
do do not do go have coffee, go walk the dog, go, you know, do other things, but just don't do that, and be upfront about it in the very beginning if that's even going to be a thing, you know. Don't do that. And I think, but that's me talking, you know. So I remember when I had a Tinder profile, I emphasized that, you know, and this was post that whole experience. I was trying to get out there again. It was, you know, I'm not really interested in a one night stand or hooking up. I just want to, like, coffee during the day. It's safe. You know, like, that's it, you know. And I, you know, we could go from there, you know, like maybe you want to do coffee again. I don't know.
Mhm.
That's like literally how, you know, that's literally how I felt. It was dangerous. And that whole experience ended up being, you know, that I think for her was sort of like in a very, you know, it was all about what's going to happen in the next 24 hours.
Mm.
This is what's working for me. This is not in a selfish way, but this is how her mechanisms worked. This is what I want. These are my needs. He fits in for now. So let's work this angle. And then once it got past that, then, you know, it was like, oh, now what? Doesn't feel right. Doesn't, you know, she would use those words. This doesn't feel right to me right now.
Mhm.
You know, oh, okay, well, I'll take off and I'll leave, you know, and then it would just ensue again. So I think we are all different. You know, you're saying like blaming somebody for being a sociopath, or like you're a sociopath. Well, there's there's people in the world who just think differently. There's assholes. That's a thing, right? Um, so what makes a sociopath any different? Well, because they're demonized. And that isn't entirely accurate. There's bad people who do bad things. They're not all sociopaths. They're not all psychopaths. You can call them that if you want. We see that in the media a lot. You know, I see that people they call this guy a sociopath because I don't agree with him. You know, and I cringe. I cringe when I hear the word narcissist.
Mhm.
There is healthy narcissism. There's healthy levels of it,
Right.
right? Like narcissism, I should hope that everybody has a little bit of that, because that's what helps you get through the hard times.
Yes.
Like, you have to have a little bit of that, you know, but we use these words to label people without really understanding that they they are considered spectrum disorders. And that doesn't mean there's anything really broken with that person, as much as like, okay, you understand it. And then, gosh, what I know now, if I could go back and live through this again, it would have never gone the way it did. You know, first of all, we would have never had sex together. That's for sure. But I would have been able to ask questions like I do
Yeah.
today, when I just have casual interactions on a business level. You know, my life now is so much more driven by definitions. So when we're speaking with each other, what do you mean by that?
Yes.
What do you mean? Can you tell me a little bit more about when you say everybody? Who is that exactly?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Can we zero in on that? Because I need to understand. That's all. I want to know where I should be in this conversation. That's all. It's not an attack. It's just like, what do you mean by everybody? And if there's criticism of somebody else, at least within my group, one of the things we try to eliminate from the conversation is I. Okay, try not to use your I. Like, there's times when that matters, but if we're being critical, it's don't use that word too much. Should have, could have, would have. Those are not allowed.
Uh-huh.
You have to keep it, because if you eliminate those words, then we're a little bit more on topic. And we can say,
Yeah.
the reason that this doesn't work is because this is happening. This is happening. And when this happens, this is the result. And here's how it's supported. See how I removed all the I's from there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not personal anymore. And so the team understands it a little better, at least on a conceptual level, not a personal level. It helps a
Yeah.
ton. So how we communicate, defining things helps a lot, especially with salespeople. I'll often ask, what's in it for you if I sign up today? Just
Are they honest with you?
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Some people are like, they get personal. Yeah, I got
Mm-hmm.
kids at home. I'm trying to do this. I'm like, okay, I know it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do a really good job. I think you do, you
Mm-hmm.
do. What's your name? And maybe I'll, send a personal note to their manager, you know, do something nice at least.
Uh-huh.
But it's about asking questions. And that's what I didn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was much more of a control freak in those early days. So at the end of all of this, the irony is, through a lot of hard work, I'm at least better in some respects, I think. Better. There's the goggles, they say, you have the goggles, you can spot distortion. I try not to look at it that way. I just try to look at, like, these are the hurdles in life that can get you in trouble. As a kid, I lived near the courthouse where I grew up. And because I liked Judge Wapner a lot, I thought it'd be fun to go to the court. I would sit in small claims court and watch. And the point here is, I would watch friends sue each other.
Yeah.
That's it was always friends. And it was always based on he said, she said. Well, and nobody had support. Like, if you didn't have receipts, you didn't have a contract, well, sorry. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. So I did some business with a close friend of mine. He couldn't understand why I had a contract in place.
Mm-hmm.
We're just friends. I go, that's right. I want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
So, like, sign it so that we understand, because words matter. So that's, a big part of the reason why things went so wrong in the very beginning. And I remember she even said to me, she goes, it was like walking through the supermarket for some reason. I can't remember what we were talking about. She goes, well, if I'm ever doing or saying anything that's weird, doesn't make sense to you, just ask. And I just went, well, you're always doing something that's weird. I didn't
Not
say that.
typical is the word
But
that
there's
you
like a
used
bunch of
before.
it that I don't understand. I didn't even know how to respond to that. So yeah, I don't know. I hope
Such good
I
advice, though. I mean, like, you talk about, okay, have a contract with your friend that you're in this deal with in the small claims court, but you have to, in my opinion, like, the best relationships have an equivalent of something like that, like a relationship type of contract that's explicit. The more explicit it is, the better. Like, I know a lot of people are like, shy away from explicit conversation in relationships. I don't understand that. That's one of those things, maybe as a psychopath, I don't get it, because like the way that I kind of came on to my girlfriend initially was, let's talk logistics. Do you want to make out with me? Yes or no?
yeah. Oh,
And if so,
that
when?
sounds super familiar to me because that's what she was like. It was literally about the logistics. Like, this is what I
Yeah.
want. This is what I
Yeah,
need
and do
now.
you want it? Because if you do, then let's talk logistics. But it's can be refreshing, but it's kind of funny too because even in a relationship with psychopaths, I've noticed this is that we come from different family backgrounds, from different social backgrounds, from different kind of like I don't know, just like different experiences. We like studied different things in college. We have, we're different generations. There's like kind of a little bit of a generation gap there. And so, like, there are misunderstandings that always happen, and it's just something that it's like entropy. You kind of constantly have to fight against it. But I think like this idea of just asking questions is so good. And it's so funny too because, like I feel like I don't do like a lot of litigation anymore as an attorney. But one thing that people used to compliment me about was that I was not afraid to ask a question, like in a deposition or something. And I think a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid to look stupid. They're afraid that they're going to like disclose something about themselves, and that they're going to be vulnerable. Like if I ask them, do they want to make out with me? Then that tells them too that I want to make out with them, basically. And maybe I don't want to get rejected or, I don't want to put myself out there or et cetera, et cetera. It is really hard. But if this is something that you really care about, then I think that you do have to kind of ask these questions. It's like the same thing with buying a car. It's the same thing with like choosing a doctor, especially for like a major surgery or something. You can't just let things go. You have to ask questions so you understand, so you feel comfortable, so you know that you made the best choice given the information that you could have obtained. Otherwise you're just kind of flying blind all the time, and I can see why people feel disempowered when that's what they do is they're not asking the questions, they're not kind of getting the information, maybe because they're afraid, but then you're in a worse situation, you're in a more fearful situation because now you don't know what's going on.
I think I for one, for sure, um, fell short, not just in the, that relationship, but in a lot of things in my life, because maybe I didn't learn how to ask questions,
Mm,
and that's a real thing with some folks is like thinking critically or thinking through a system, and a relationship can be a system.
yeah, it is a system. Yeah.
Right? So thinking that through, being able to ask questions means a couple things. Is one, we're thinking about it in terms of we're thinking about it dynamically, and instead of just myself,
Yeah.
right? If I go into it thinking that if it's just me, then there are no questions to ask.
Right. Because
There's
you already know all the answers in your own
I
head
know
or
all the
whatever.
answers, and even when I'm wrong, I'm gonna impose my will. And I think in a lot of ways, that's how I came into that,
Mm,
at least that relationship, but not in an unhealthy way. You know, I'm a fairly agreeable person, which I don't like, but I'm agreeable. And um, but I wasn't any good at asking questions on that level, you know, on a person. I'm good logistically, like if I'm gonna accomplish a task, I'm good in that environment. Okay, this because I'm able to fail. I'm
oh,
able,
yeah.
okay, I'm able to fail. I'm able to do,
You're
oh, I can,
okay with it. Like failure doesn't hurt you.
well,
You're
failure doesn't, yeah, failure really doesn't hurt me all that much,
mhm.
but I learn from it. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this again. If I'm gonna, I wanted to win a mountain bike race in May. Didn't happen. Did I feel like a failure? No, but I know what I need to do for next year. Believe me, I'm competing against a bunch of old geezers like myself, and
Okay.
I'm certain that I can beat them. So I forget that I'm just as old as they are, and so
Mhm.
but I know where I went wrong, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to fix that. So this is just that's just that is just procedural thinking,
Mhm.
but it doesn't apply to people. So when I fail with somebody, I panic.
Mm.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, well, look at it this way. Like, let's talk this out. And that is just isn't always an option, you know.
Yeah.
There because there's emotions involved. There's feelings, what I wanted. Asking questions will reduce that from happening. That's what I've learned through all of this. It's like learn how to work with people and learn to ask. The more questions I ask, the better for everybody, even if they're uncomfortable. It's better
Yes.
that discomfort that I feel pales in comparison to the horror of loss, personal
Hmm.
loss.
Yeah.
It really, really does. So, I, I could go back to my childhood and I can definitely, there was a lot of that through this process of going back into my childhood and asking, what is it about my childhood that put me in a position where I felt like I deserved this? And because I didn't get it, what does that mean? Right? Because my behavior wasn't normal, like it wasn't healthy. Okay, what happened in my youth that I'm so
Mm.
afraid of that parlays in that? Or was there anything? And
Yeah.
there was for sure. I grew up in a my mother was um a, an alcoholic, and my poor dad had to deal with that. And so I spent a lot of my youth alone. And like I would go soccer games, I would compete in surf contests, I would and do well sometimes. And it was always crushing that I was there alone
Yeah.
because I could see the families for the other kids were all there supporting them. It was just me. And so rejection or any kind of failure with another person just kind of dovetails into those feelings. I have no animosity towards my parents at all. You know, they did the best they could. And well, alcoholism is a whole nother
Yeah.
no whole topic, why that happens. But there are things in our childhoods that in a big way drive our adult behavior, you know, and because we're adults and time has passed, we only know what we're attached to our realities sometimes in an unhealthy way. So sometimes
Yeah.
our behavior can appear sociopathic, but we're not clinically a sociopath. It's like some people exhibit really intense narcissism, but they're not really narcissists, like in everything that they do. It's just in this circumstance, they're highly narcissistic, you know,
Right.
So I'll tell you what, like people who have been abused definitely exhibit psychopathic behavior.
Yeah. Drug addicts,
Uh-huh.
people that are like victims of war, violence.
Oh yeah, PTSD, but that doesn't make them a psychopath or a bad person.
Yeah.
But bad things happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people can be reluctant to kind of admit that maybe they played a role in certain situations because, maybe for various reasons. Like I think victimhood does have some cachet right now, social cachet. I think that maybe they've never felt like they could admit that they were kind of a victim, and so this seems like a big thing to admit that they're a victim. I'm just guessing, these are guesses, why people kind of like are a little bit reluctant to admit what role, if any, they played in kind of a bad situation. But
Right.
I guess the main benefit that I'm kind of hearing from you is if you do kind of do the work to look to see what parts, well, not even bad parts, but just the role that you played. Like, what was I seeking from this? What was enticing about this to me? Like, if you're able to kind of try to objectively look at some of your behaviors and kind of examine, like, what was kind of my motivation? What was the underlying drive or desire that I was seeking to be met? Then you can try to find ways to meet those needs that you have. And everybody has personal needs, but you can find a way to meet those needs in a healthy way. So
Oh
this
yeah.
doesn't happen again. So you're happier, so your life is better. Like it can be a good kind of learning experience if you let it, if you allow it to be.
You're right. I think one thing that others might hear from what I'm saying that they may not agree with is saying, okay, I failed at something, or I'm a victim, as if I'm saying that in a way like I'm now kind of a loser.
Mm.
Okay. Oh, I'm a victim. So therefore, I'm going to go out to the world and I'm a victim. It's not like that. It's more like, okay, it's a starting point. All right. This is what happened. I got myself in this situation. Does this define me? Hmm. No, it doesn't. Is this who I am? No. Is this what I am? No, it isn't. So there can be some confusion, I think, in that narrative inside one's head, where if you say, what does being a victim mean?
Yeah.
Okay. I I could go out for a bike ride today and get hit by a bus. Am I a victim? Yeah. Did I choose that? No. Do I feel bad about myself that I'm a loser? No. It's a consequence of what I was doing. Will I get better? I hope so. Maybe the bus didn't hit me really hard, but you know
Hmm.
what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Um, so if we look at it from a standpoint of just pure pride, and that hurts your pride, then that's not good. We got to look at it as if it was a broken component of our being.
Exactly.
And so,
So,
okay, this component isn't optimized. It doesn't work very well. It caused this situation to happen, and I can avoid this by doing one thing that I was conscious of when I was going through. I didn't, and I didn't. I saw, like I said, I recommend people see a therapist. The therapist didn't really help me. If anything, it just made me feel just like I'm just not getting anywhere.
mm,
You know, I really felt like I could do this on my own. So I don't recommend people do it on their own. I did because that's what felt right to me. So when I go into a therapist's office, you know, I could talk about how I was feeling, and I was met with like tools that you could use, like affirmations, meditations, and things. And I'm like, I kind of already know that. And I tried it and doesn't do anything. So um I don't want people to feel like because they say they're a victim that is a sign of weakness. If
mm.
anything, if you can say, look, I was victimized, okay, that's kind of brave,
Yeah.
like for
Well,
me,
especially to admit it is
you know,
brave.
yeah, that's brave. And it doesn't make everything right in the moment, but that's a starting point. If you can identify that, first of all, is that you're a victim. Because if we don't admit that we're a victim, then we're continually subjected to the abuse, whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's a cycle. It just keeps going on and on and on. I know like battered women in relationships with men who are just abusive, physically abusive. They beat up their wives. And then who was the girl who was gosh, what was her name from Florida? She was killed and buried in near Grand Teton National Park.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Gabby Petito, right?
Gabby Petito. Okay, this is
Yeah.
this is a typical. I remember watching this and going, "Oh, she's abused," because I could just hear it and see it.
Yeah.
She's sitting there telling the officers that she's fine. She's scratch on her face. She was hitting him. All these things to protect him. And this is what a victim does, because there's hope. There's hope that it'll get better. There's hope that we'll be able to fix this. And there's no fixing that kind of abuse. It always ends in a very bad way. Hopefully not murder like it did for her, but it ends very badly. And 50 years goes by, and it's a lifetime of this relationship of being battered. And that person can still say, I'm a victim, and start right there. And that doesn't mean you're going to stop being the victim right away. But if you admit that, and then you take the steps in understanding that, you're on your way. You're on your way. You're on your way to go, okay, you're going to go from a victim to a survivor.
Right.
You're going to go and you're going to go through that process of understanding what it is to be a victim. Okay. What it is to be you as a victim. What happened to you? Why did it happen? And it's brutal. And maybe a therapist is a good way to do that. But boy, I would, cognitive behavioral therapy maybe is the way to go. I don't know for sure on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I know at least for me, it was about understanding what I felt was abuse and what really was abuse. And then being able to understand why it was happening, what my role in it was, and changing that. And in changing that, I changed my circumstances. And then, and it took me, 5+ years to do that. Maybe it could take somebody a week, maybe, maybe a couple days, hopefully. It just took me 5 years of working it, And so, yeah, for me, like I'm sometimes I've heard men don't have these kind of problems. I'm like, no, men just don't talk about it. There's lots of men out there that are like zombies walking around, just like truly hurt inside. And it's because you're a man, you can't talk about this. This is where I go with the stigmatization of psychological disorder. Doesn't mean it's not about psychopaths, sociopaths. It's about all of us in some real way. We deal with some kind of hurt or some kind of a disorder. And then when we go to seek help for it, we're like, oh, there's something wrong with you. You're not stable, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I brought up that, like, the fat lady at the gym. Well, oh, she's got a weight problem. Well, okay, maybe so, right? Obviously, yeah, okay, but
Mm-hmm.
she's doing something about it. Does that make her strong? Yes. Stronger than the person who's not doing anything about it.
That's
So,
right.
right. So you take those first steps. There's that guy, David Goggins, who I
Yeah,
read.
David Goggins, stay
Yeah,
hard.
that guy. I tell you what, I saw a post of his yesterday and I just like reading it. It was a before and after, like him in the 90s and then him today. And he says, I don't read the whole thing because I know the story,
Yeah.
but I remember he writes, that motherfucker, he was, that was a weak motherfucker. you know, Things like that. And I relate to that, because in a lot of ways, when I was suffering, that was me,